Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Fallout Season 2, Episode 6 video. There were a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references to the games, as well as a bunch of WTF moments and big reveals. There is a lot to unpack. You can definitely tell we're getting close to the end of the season because all the big storylines are starting to converge towards each other, and they're finally answering more of the big questions that they raised at the beginning of the season. The title of the episode was The Other Player, which is meant to be a reference to probably the Enclave because they were the big person that all the different character groups, the different storylines we're talking about this week. The group of people that Mr. House was worried about, that they implied were the ones to actually drop the bombs, that Mr. House thought would actually be dropping the bombs. And the mystery group that Barb said was threatening her through Wilzig's character, who's also from the Institute, as we saw during Season 1. Implying that the Enclave was also pulling the strings on the Institute while they were also pulling the strings on Vault-Tec and everything else, orchestrating the droppings of the bombs, because they confirm that this mystery group, probably the Enclave, told Barb that she was supposed to plant the idea in the board to drop the bombs themselves. So it was all the Enclave's idea, and we get a big cameo scene from Pearlman, who plays a Supermutant. If you didn't play the games, he also recites the intro, War Never Changes. It's actually a very famous intro.
War never changes.
They recite that line a couple times in this episode too. His Supermutant character literally calls out the Enclave as the bad guy in this giant war that will be coming, I think implying that the Enclave will be the big villains in Season 3, like the overarching antagonist. Although technically they're kind of the villains right now. Maybe we've seen a couple characters who are Enclave that we haven't heard about yet, and I now think this confirms that Hank was speaking to them on the other side of the radio in Episode 1, the mystery player where he said he was going to restart the chip program, and maybe that would give him a promotion. He's probably trying to get promoted to the Enclave. We will unpack this as we go along through the episode, because now don't you also kind of think that Cooper's daughter and his wife won't be in those cryotubes that Hank has? They might wind up being held by the Enclave, and we might not really see them until Season 3, but maybe it'll be a big teaser for where they really are at the end of this season. It just feels like it'll be too easy for Cooper, Maximus, and Thaddeus to make it to New Vegas to try and save Lucy inside Hank's company vault and find out that his wife and child are there. Like, it just feels like he'll open the tubes and they won't be there. But this is a very big Barb episode. We get way more time with her than we have in any of the previous episodes. It starts with a flashback to her at Vault-Tec watching a highlight reel of the bombs dropping as the marketing team explains sales numbers, business figures to her as part of the larger plan that Vault-Tec is trying to orchestrate as they construct the actual vaults. But this is meant to be before the big meeting where she gives them the idea to drop the bombs before the Enclave, through Wilzig's Institute character, gives her the idea that she better give them the idea to drop the bombs or her family is dead. And also, if he didn't give her this message, then the Enclave would have probably killed him too. So if it wasn't clear on the timeline of the episode starts before her big conference where Cooper listened in about her dropping the bombs. Most of all her scenes here, as well as later, are meant to humanize her in a way because Cooper flat out calls her a monster. Like, how could you do all these things? And they're using this episode to reveal that she didn't do this on purpose. She was actually trying to help her family. Even though she's kind of complicit in some of these things, she was actually forced to do some of these by the Enclave. So you can let me know in the comments after you see the truth of it all if you sympathize with Barb's character now for like all the things that she did that made her seem terrible during Season 1 in the first part of Season 2. I think they really just want you to understand why she's doing all these things without necessarily coming down on any kind of moral direction like, is she bad, is she good? Because they use it as a parallel for Hank's storyline, and they definitely want you to feel like Hank is a bad character. Hank basically spends the entire episode trying to justify his actions to Lucy. Is it not true that every villain feels like they're the hero of their own story and that their causes are righteous? Hank is like the perfect example of that in this episode.
Kumbaya.
You can kind of see her at the beginning of the episode where she's watching the bombs drop on the highlight reel and they're just going all blasé about it. 5 bombs? 10 bombs? No, maybe 10 is too much. Very, very disgusting, but you kind of got that vibe from them during Season 1, Season 2, and if you played any of the games, this is obviously very normal for Vault-Tec in the games. They're all meant to be terrible, terrible people. Pretty much anybody that works for any of the companies in Fallout are terrible people. You notice her secretary behind her also starts to act like she's a little horrified by it too. Reminder that this is also Betty, the old woman who's currently running Vault 33. Don't you also now wonder if Betty knows where Cooper's wife and his daughter wound up? But there's a lot of important exposition in this backstory that they fill in here during all these different meetings that Barb has. There's a very big Easter egg with the failing water chips. This is both currently a problem that Vault 33, Betty here, ironically, Betty here who's watching this and taking notes on this, knows that it's going to happen. So Betty, while she's trying to fix the problem, knew that this was going to happen to her. And fixing the water chip is also one of the first missions that you have in the Fallout games. But really the big joke here is that Vault-Tec knew ahead of time which water chips would fail, so they basically asked Barb to choose, which one do you want to fail? Like, who wants to get the failing one first? So this was all part of their social experiment, and it just wound up being Betty that got the short end of the stick, because now she's in charge of Vault 33, and she has to fix the water chip that she knew was going to fail. Then we see Bud in human form. He says Vault-Tec will get a 30-minute alert warning before the rest of the public when the bombs are about to go off. But remember, this is when Vault-Tec still thinks that it's going to know when the bombs are actually going to go off. Mr. House talked to Cooper about this later. Like, this is before the New Vegas meeting. This is before Cooper has met with Mr. House. And Mr. House has explained the changing timeline on when the bombs actually dropped. The whole reason why the date that the bombs changed was because Cooper came to New Vegas, implying that something happened in New Vegas, and it's happening right now as we see during the episode, during that part of the storyline. And if we know now that the Enclave was behind that, they're the mystery player, they're probably monitoring what Cooper is doing and what his wife is doing, especially with the cold fusion here, and they're probably the ones that moved up the date on dropping the bombs because of what they did. Mr. House basically says that he's got everybody LoJack, like he's listening in on everyone's communications all over the world, and it's how he stays ahead on his technology. Like, I know what everybody else is doing because he kind of listens in to what everybody is doing. But the events of this episode, especially what happened with Wilzig in the Institute telling Barb what to do, basically pulling the strings on Vault-Tec, imply that the Enclave is also doing the same thing. Couple other Easter eggs here connecting this with previous episodes and twists that we've already seen. Bud mentions the premium customers. Remember, that was the special vault holding facility that Hank used as a farm to test out the control chip on. We get a custom Barb title. This is the first time the show's actually done that in a big segment on Barb specifically. Like I said, this is basically an episode to humanize her character more and make you identify with her a little bit. She meets with the fake Mr. House next, and Hank, her assistant. Hank says he's here to take notes on this meeting specifically because he's showing them the control chip that the real Mr. House developed. Now, because I think we all agree that Hank was probably talking to the Enclave on the other side of the radio in episode 1 in present day, saying that he was going to finish the control chip project for them, and that would gain him the promotion that he wants. Don't you now think that Hank in the past was already working with the Enclave, trying to cozy up to them so that he could get in on this project as part of that? Like, the Enclave basically told him to sit in on this meeting because the Enclave is also trying to pull the strings on the control chip. Fake Mr. House even surprises Barb by saying that it was Vault-Tec that actually ordered us to build this control chip. But Barb had no idea about this plan, even though she's at the top of Vault-Tec and would supposedly know all their plans, implying that it was the Enclave that wanted the control chip in the past, and they used Vault-Tec as a shell company so that Mr. House wouldn't learn that it was the Enclave that wanted it.
You're paying me for this.
You remember in New Vegas when he was explaining things to Cooper, he said that he wasn't sure who was behind all these things, who was pulling all these strings. So Mr. House didn't know about the Enclave because they were using Vault-Tec as an intermediary shell company. They call the control chip the automated man, basically turning people into machines, glorified finger puppets, which we see later in the episode, flesh bots, whatever you want to call them. She calls out the special arrangement that Vault-Tec had with Robco and Mr. House in the past. The idea that they've been working closely for a long time. Vault-Tec uses a lot of Robco technology in a lot of different ways, both legit and kind of shady, like with the control chip now. As part of that deal, they gave control of a bunch of different vaults for Robco and Mr. House basically to experiment on, which we saw with the fake commies in the vault that was near New Vegas. House's deal was that he would make the chip for Vault-Tec, although technically he's making it for the Enclave, even though he didn't know that he was making it for the Enclave, in exchange for cold fusion. Last week he explained he was going to use cold fusion to power his missile defense system so that it wouldn't be destroyed by the coming Great War because he knew the bombs would drop at some point. It was just the date had been shifting. She has a very understandable crash out after hearing all of this, which shows you that she's in a complete monster. She looks at a picture of Cooper and her daughter Janie, also meant to remind you of the picture that the other Vault-Tec employees found in Barb's office in present day too, previously. This time, the custom Fallout title is designed to look like the control chip because of the end of the episode and Lucy seeing what Hank has done with it, turning all these different people into flesh bots. We go back to present day to the Cooper storyline showing him try to escape being impaled on the pole. He's also trying to reach his stash of vials because he's in the process of turning full ghoul. Dogmeat to the rescue, who does make good by the end of the episode, getting Maximus and Thaddeus. More on that in a second when we get to that part of the episode. But all of Fallout's transition works between the different storylines this week were on point, because most of the transitions between past and present day and even the different storylines are between people passing out and then people coming to, like Cooper passes out and then wakes up in the flashbacks when he's talking to his wife. They finally start having it out. Cooper tries to get the truth out of her, and she slowly starts to tease out the idea of the Enclave, this mystery secret puppeteer who's pulling all the strings on these things, making her do all this stuff. They were way, way worse than she could ever be. This time, Cooper also says, "War never changes." That's a line that Ron Pearlman speaks in the game, also Supermutant Cameo, and also Barb's character spoke it during Season 1. A couple other characters speak it too during the show. Hank also speaks a version of it later in this episode as well. Then we get another pass-out, wake-up transition to Lucy, who's waking up inside Hank's special company vault under New Vegas. He leaves her that yellow dress to wear. We know at some point, based on the trailer, she actually winds up in it for some reason. He left her the sugar bombs here because that's her favorite food, but you also notice that there's a glass window in front of this observation area, like it's marked Observation Area 7. Isn't it like anybody can just use it to peep on whoever's inside, trapped inside? Definitely creepy, but that's kind of the vibe of everything that happens inside this special vault that Hank has been experimenting with. Like everything about this vault and what he's doing is creepy. They use her spotting the two Legionnaires to start setting up the whole idea of the control chip. Like, she's been with the Legion, she was held hostage by them for a little while, she knows that they're terrible. They're meant to be one of the worst, most violent factions in the Wasteland, but these two just seem like complete chums, like, oh hey, what's going on? The whole reason why they don't attack her specifically is because Hank did program them to act as security. They're walking around the halls doing normal security work.
Beautiful day, isn't it?
Hank's whole goal here is to get Lucy on board with this, so he programmed them, like everybody with their chips, not to hurt Lucy. Even though the end of the episode makes it seem like they have some form of independent thought, they are basically still flesh puppets that Hank can reprogram and tell them to do things, make them do things with the control chip. Then we find what Hank has been doing is that after he chips them all up, he's just putting them in the production line here to construct even more chips, basically to exponentially create more chips and collect more people to take over the entire wasteland and then eventually take over the world. And remember, the whole idea here is that he's cozying up with the Enclave, meaning it's the Enclave that's trying to conquer the world using the control chips now. She has her very weird reunion with Hank inside the makeshift vault kitchen in-house, meant to look just like the one that they grew up in Vault 33. We find out that his book here, All Quiet on the Western Front, they were reading when the attack went down during Season 1, Episode 1, and the Raiders got them. They were like in the middle of getting ready to discuss that. Lucy was in the middle of reading it. Hank uses the book and the message of the book, the story of the book, as a way to justify all the terrible things that he's done, like dropping the bomb on Shady Sands, everything that he's doing with the control chip right now, and with the Enclave to try and take over the world. I can't speak for people who live outside the United States, but people inside the United States generally have to study All Quiet on the Western Front at some point in school, either like high school or college at some point. It is probably one of the best war stories of all time and was also adapted to a movie, so you can watch a movie if you don't want to actually read the book, but I would definitely recommend it. It chronicles the brutal experiences of young German soldiers during World War I. There are a couple references back to Season 1, Episode 1, where Hank says, oh, we were gonna finish talking about it before the wedding, but then the Raiders attacked, and the idea is they couldn't finish. Most of their reunion is confronting Lucy with the idea that her father is beyond saving, like he is definitely the villain of this story. Hank uses the book, though, to try and justify all of his actions and explain why he's pursuing this plan to use the control chip and why he was part of Vault Tech and why he's working with the Enclave in the first place, because he saw their plan in the mind control chip as a way to bring peace to all the chaos that is free will. Basically opting for peace over free will, like we will make everything good, but nobody gets to do what they want ever again, which is just slavery with extra steps. Hank also says a version of the line from the games, some things never change, as in war never changes. There's a real quick blink and you'll miss it moment when he opens up the drawer to pull the cuffs out so that Lucy can put him in cuffs. There's a book on welding. I don't know if that's going to wind up being important. We will see in the next couple of episodes. But he basically spends the rest of the episode taunting her with the idea that many of the people here prefer being mindless robots without free will, and tries to make it seem like that legitimizes everything that he's done. And it is some S-tier villain logic, like all villains, like I said, think themselves the heroes of their own stories, and he views this cause as righteous. But it does seem like Lucy, by the end of the episode, is like, oh yeah, my dad is terrible. He is definitely the villain of this story right now. Not the main villain, because we learn about the Enclave. He's definitely an very low on the totem pole if you're talking about big villains in the series. Then we jump back to Maximus' storyline. He and Thaddeus ditch the power armor because the Brotherhood can track it, but they take the cold fusion and head off to find a buyer, even though they have a lot of arguments about what they should do with it. Basically, Thaddeus trying to convince him that they should get the money and they can use the money to do good things, which is just another slippery slope where they would wind up turning into villains ultimately too. I think that's meant to be the ironic twist on that. There's a couple holes in Thaddeus' plan, like they would probably start out trying to do good things and then ultimately turn into villains themselves, like wealth would not make them good people. That's kind of one of the messages of the Fallout TV series and the Fallout games just in general too, like all this capitalism behind the companies ultimately led to very, very terrible things. Maximus then says that he wants to give the cold fusion to Lucy because she's the only good person that he knows, I think also setting up the reunion that we'll eventually see by the end of the season.
That girl I met. The Vault Dweller.
Just because they eventually wind up running into Cooper, and we know that Cooper wants to save Lucy, so they all have to eventually go back to Lucy. This is also probably how the cold fusion winds up getting back to Mr. House, because Mr. House still wants the cold fusion, and if they're all heading back to Lucy and Lucy is near New Vegas, then they're going to be near Mr. House, and Thaddeus was also talking about finding a buyer who would have the money to pay for something like cold fusion, but Mr. House. They both talk about their childhood. Thaddeus said he was born on the bad side of the Boneyard. That's basically Los Angeles, which is also around where Lucy is from too, where Vault 33 was. Maximus also starts talking about his time growing up in Shady Sands, which we just saw a little of during the flashbacks. Then we go back to Cooper, who tries to pull himself off the pole using his daughter to try and keep himself sane. He fails, but gets saved by our big cameo scene, Ron Pearlman, who's playing a super mutant. I think this is the first time we've genuinely seen an actual super mutant in the TV series, but maybe there have been some references in the background in previous episodes. When he says there's a war coming, he's basically talking about a war between all the ghouls, the super mutants, the other abominations, and the Enclave, basically setting up the Enclave, what I think is the big villain of what will be Season 3, like this war that he's talking about will take place in Season 3. When he says they created our kind, super mutants are the product of the forced evolutionary virus, which Norm just learned about in Vault-Tec. Vault-Tec had been part of, but West-Tec helped develop it initially. But now that we know that the Enclave was pulling the strings on both Vault-Tec, the Institute, and probably West-Tec, maybe even Mr. House a little bit too, because Mr. House didn't know about them. This implies that the Enclave was ultimately responsible for the creation of super mutants. Cooper is a loner through and through, wants nothing to do with his larger war, doesn't want to be part of that again. He was already in the military before the Great War. He doesn't want to go back into another military. Ron Pearlman knocks him out and then drags him out of town so that he can eventually wind up meeting with Maximus and Thaddeus. We briefly go back to Reg's Twincest snack group, which has gotten much larger because of all the snacks, also a couple of them genuinely into the Twincest, like from previous episodes. Then they pull this WandaVision type of trick where you're in the middle of a scene and the aspect ratio switches as you're going into Reg's perspective. Like this is meant to be Reg's fantasy as he's singing this song, playing on the piano in 4:3 aspect ratio. When the party starts to go wild, the song he's playing is Uranium Fever, which is also part of the Fallout game. They've used a number of songs from the games in the show so far. There's usually like one song from the game in each episode, at least one. Sometimes there's multiple songs. Betty shows up with security, banning their group and taking their snacks, and tells everybody about the water problem, but they're all predictably idiots. They're trying to draw a parallel between this group of idiots and Hank's group of idiots that seemingly don't want to leave and they want to stay chipped up and being controlled. Both groups will probably have some sort of ironic comeuppance at some point. Definitely feels like Reg has an even more punchable face than Hank in this episode, though. Like, Hank seems like a worse villain, but Reg has the punchable face. They go back to Chet's storyline with all the Steph secrets he started learning about. There have been so many memes about Steph being Canadian now with like the South Park version of Canadian. It's been hilarious. You remember, the only reason he really suspects her is because she's Canadian and didn't tell her that secret. He doesn't know about any of the other Vault-Tec stuff yet. Learns that Woody is missing and suspects Steph of foul play, gets angry when they suggest that he's married to Steph, but then later finds out to his horror that they're going to be getting married later that day. So it just seems like Chet is just headed for some blow-up with Steph at some point in the next episode. Generally, they want to make it feel like everybody is going to go crazy, like the vaults are going to collapse into chaos in the final episodes. Will they live or will they die? I think most of them will wind up living, like there'll be something that will wind up saving them. It'll probably wind up being something that Betty and Steph do. But I do think that the season ends with most of the characters in the vaults who don't already know Vault Tech's secret find out the secret. After Cooper got knocked out again, we go back into another flashback to get the rest of his wife's explainer, where she's basically explaining everything she's done, everything that's happening with the Enclave, and we get the reveal of what's in Hank's briefcase in the big twist. She explains how she already tried to steal cold fusion from Vault Tech, but the Enclave stopped her through Michael Emerson's Will Zig, who works for the Institute, meaning they're also probably controlling the Institute as well. But it also implies that the Enclave was secretly spying on Barb and everything she was doing, all of her conversations, so it knew that she was in danger of rebelling against them and stealing cold fusion, like, you better not do this or else your family is gonna die. They force her to give the board the idea to drop the bombs themselves, but like Mr. House said in New Vegas, the board was never gonna do it themselves. It was always gonna be the Enclave, it sounds like, and the date kept shifting. Also, fun fact too, Barb's outfit in New Vegas, the white one, is meant to look just like the ones the synths wear in the games too. That's why a lot of people are like, oh no, is Barb going to turn out to be a synth? I don't think that's the case, but I do think we'll see synths on the show eventually if we haven't already seen a secret synth or like a character who's already a synth that we don't know about yet. We get that final moment between Lucy and Hank where she talks about leaving all the doors open when she takes him back to Vault 33, and Hank uses this as another way to justify his actions by carting in the NCR trooper from earlier this season who was fighting with a member of the Legion that they nabbed and then chip up. With the idea that the Legionnaire almost killed Lucy and then tried to staple the NCR trooper to death, seems like that would have taken a while to happen. But it winds up being Lucy to flip the switch, the activation switch, causing them to fall into line like the others. Hank thinking this proves his point, like this justifies it all. See, like what would have happened if you hadn't pressed that button and they hadn't been chipped up? And in the past, we get the big reveal of what's inside young Hank's actual briefcase. I was actually surprised by this. I wasn't sure what we were going to find in there. I thought it was going to be the control chip. But it actually winds up being an extraction device, and the real big twist here is that Hank himself, like his body, was the actual briefcase, and they put the cold fusion in his neck to disguise it so that nobody could steal it. I am no scientist, I'm no nuclear physicist, but putting cold fusion inside your body just doesn't feel like a really healthy thing to do. But remember, Mr. House never winds up getting this cold fusion. It actually winds up in the hands of the Institute because of the events of Season 1. We know that Will Zig gets his hands on cold fusion and then passes it to Lucy, who then gives it to Moldaver. This is probably why we saw the Will Zig flashbacks in this episode, to set up further flashbacks where he also gets his hands on cold fusion again after this moment. Basically the idea that the Enclave wants to control cold fusion. Then the episode with Cooper reuniting with Maximus and Thaddeus from Season 1, who he absolutely hates, like, oh, these guys, oh, hell no, with them all on their way back to New Vegas by next week's episode. So everyone start posting all your theories about Mr. House getting his hands on the cold fusion once they come back into proximity at some point. But over the end credits this time, whole bunch of Easter eggs like there are every episode. There are manuals for Bud's program to turn them into the brains in jars. We're in Bud's office, that's why there's all this Bud stuff. I kind of think these quarter 3 business plans are meant to be a teaser for Fallout Season 3 because we already know they're going to be filming Season 3 pretty soon. Turns out Bud is a huge comic book fan. The Grognak comic book is from the Fallout games. It's canon. Grognak the Barbarian. There's also an action figure here too. So Bud just really likes this stuff. He's a huge fanboy. Kind of like Fallout's version of Marvel Comics and Marvel superheroes. As we pull out of his office, we go through the rest of the Vault Tech's offices. We see that it's in the wasteland. This is after the bombs drop because everybody's dead. There are also a couple of things that they reference from earlier in the episode too, a couple of callbacks like the water chip development room, the failing water chip that they plan to fail on purpose. Everybody post all your reactions in the comments below, and if you spotted any Easter eggs or references to the games or anything else in the episode that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. My episode 7 video will post next week after they release it, and the big reminder is that there's only 2 episodes left. Episode 8 is the finale. They will be filming Season 3 very soon too, so I wouldn't be surprised if they start confirming some people's big theories about how the Enclave ties into all this and the other big forces in the games that we haven't seen too much of this season already. But everybody click here for that episode 7 video. I'll update the link as soon as I post it, and click here for all my other Fallout episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.